Hello, how are we? I just thought that I would come on because it is the summer solstice in the astrological calendar. It's the start of Cancer season, and it's essentially just where everything kind of, rebirths. That being said, I think the main point of this video was really more just a self-affirmation in a sense, or more just like a marking point of my priorities. And I think I just wanted to talk a little bit about that because, it's interesting like which priorities we prioritize. And even though we may all have the intention for it to kind of achieve or go towards the same goal, there's certain layers to it. I guess like learning and like reflecting and realizing, the priorities that you kind of do need to really take to get it to the more precise part of your goal, or I guess the core of your goal, the crux of your goal. It's cool to see yourself kind of go down all these different rabbit holes and like pathways where you're like learning so much on those paths, but there's something that really tells you that when you're leading astray, or when you just have a feeling like, okay, this is really beneficial and this is really good for my skill set, my knowledge, my personal growth. But I think that it's always, I guess, reminding yourself and being aware of when you really do start feeling like it is towards it. But I think if you're really not feeling that in your gut, in your stomach, then that's just what you really need to trust and kind of redirect yourself. I think that that's just kind of been really what I've been feeling this weekend. I really feel like a part of me has died. Not in a depressing way, like at all, but definitely in not even grieving, but I would say like you're just feeling a little bit disassociated with yourself, and more like maybe feeling like the person who you want to be and who you're becoming and who you were, which you've just felt like detached from. You're kind of in the middle of that. I think like when it comes to really building your sense of value, and skill set definitely is a part of this. I'm really talking about, how we invest in ourselves for our value, and how it's really interesting when you kind of like become aware of, the things that you can maybe naturally attach to that you believe give you value. In lots of ways, the things that you think give you value is really because I think you're avoiding what actually will give you value. But I think that you're afraid of really leaning into that, because I think that when you really are committed to enhancing your value, it's not easy, and it's also so personal, because you have to accept and you have to admit that like this specific thing is what's going to make me feel more valuable for myself, and not for anyone else, like for myself. But maybe I just like have never explored that, or I'm just scared of really trying to commit to that, because if I fail that, then I'm going to fail, the value that I really believe that I can have. And I think that it's really about that kind of, that self-acceptance, but also I think it's more of a reflection of your self-rejection. And I think a lot of the things that you reject yourself of, or that you reject of other people, and maybe not in a conscious way, like, oh, like they're doing cooking and I want to like, and that's like my dream, but more in the way of like on a subconscious level, where it's like, damn, like they're an amazing cook, or amazing chef, and I wish I could be that. Probably usually comes out more in that way. But I think that when it comes to really noticing those observations of yourself, I think that that's when you're really able to realize what it is that you keep refusing to at least even embrace, that that's something that you want for yourself. And there's a difference between, and that is self-acceptance at the end of the day. But I think that it's first even admitting it before accepting it. And so I think that like there's definitely just some things that I think it's important to think about what you're not admitting, what you're afraid to admit. when it comes to your dreams, your visions. And I think like going back to the whole like value concept with ourselves, I think that, yeah, how we build value in ourselves can be obviously quite externalized, but not just externalized in the sense of things that we can like gain or possess or I guess merit based, but I think also like skill set, you know, like I'm talking more specifically about the skill set that we kind of even attach ourselves to, you know, because I think a lot of our skill set at the end of the day, I feel is usually, I think, a mix of the skill set that has helped you kind of survive, you know, or I guess like stay afloat, you know. And I think that those skill sets is a really clear indication of the strengths of you, the natural strengths of you, you know, because I think we do naturally work best with, you know, our natural strengths and our natural weaknesses, or we tend to avoid our natural weaknesses. But I think when it comes to our natural strengths, I think they're great indications of, you know, the direction of where you can be heading, right? And so like, let's say for me, for example, when it comes to like communication's always been a thing that I've really explored, or it's something that I've always loved. And I think that it's something, yeah, I guess it's been pretty natural for the most of it. When it comes to like the exploration of communication, I feel like it's interesting because you can sometimes fall into a slippery slope where like, you know, because you do have like a natural gift of it, you can kind of just create a comfort zone there, you know. And especially like, for example, if you've naturally been good at, let's say, communicating with other people, if it's like interview based, or, you know, group conversation in that sense, presentation, that might just be something that, you know, obviously you love doing because you're good at it. You know, does it really, I guess, enhance or exceed the goal that, you know, your sense of value? Because I think that there's a really big difference between the value that we, I guess, praise ourselves on because others and we're recognized for it, and the value that we feel inherently. And so, for example, with communication, for me, communication is definitely a huge part of where I see my value and where my value is seen as well. But I think that when it comes to my real, I guess, like fulfillment or expanded kind of experience of it, I think that it's so much broader and it's so much more musical. For example, the music writing correlation, when it comes to like the intersection between music and writing or communication, me admitting that and me accepting that, and then I guess me taking those steps towards it. And so I think that that's like more what I was referring to, because I think like when you do find a sense of value and a sense of comfort in like, you know, the things that you've been doing for a bit, or the things that, you know, have been an easier introduction or segue into, I guess, your main journey or your big journey. You know, I guess it's just reminding yourself that, okay, this is a great start and it's been an amazing, you know, way to really, you know, solidify so much of your foundation. But that's not the vision and that's not the goal. Like the goal is, you know, it's different. You know, I really want to share my process. And I think genuinely probably more for the sake of like my own accountability. And I think that really being able to communicate and just like speak my mind on this journey, this process, like it's already feeling so much more comfortable and like reassuring in that sense. I guess like for someone who like has never thought that they would be in this realm, you know, or in this like direction, you know, I think that it's really nice to be able to share it. I think that it's also a process that hasn't been shared a lot. I really feel okay with sharing this journey, even if I do something completely different. Like, who knows, I might just become a holistic health practitioner, you know, like maybe this was just like the most random intense side quest my soul has ever needed to do. But you know, I think that I've learnt through radio that I really love seeing the process and documenting the process and communicating the process. Like, I think, you know, I care so much about how people think and how I think, and being able for people to really listen to it, because I think when people listen to how everyone thinks, things become clearer, you know, like the things that like most people say when they're not showing the process, you just try and fill in the gaps yourself, you know. Oh, like, you know, they probably always loved music, they probably, you know, always had this vision, you know. You're never gonna know unless, you know, until you know, they have interviews. And I think that's the beauty of interviews, and more importantly the beauty of like self-documentation. And, you know, if it feels right for you to share it, you know, I think that that's really what the world needs a bit more of. And less opinions, you know, like less opinions on, you know, what everything is or whatever. Being real about the process of all of our journeys. I think that's really what social media, you know, is meant to be. And that's kind of like what I find so beautiful about social media. It's something I've always seen and valued and I guess utilized it for. And I think, like I said, like the radio show has just really allowed me to uncover that. Something else I wanted to talk about was, you know, I guess like my producer name, and my DJ name. I guess I'd like to say like my music alter ego is Naisa. And I have been attached to that word for a long time, way before this, like sometime in like high school. To it, I was like, you know, I'm gonna use this one day, you know, I don't know for what, but I'm just gonna, like, that's gonna be my name, like I claim it, you know. And I think that like something that I do really want to document is becoming Naisa, you know, because I think that as much as I love being like my authentic self, and I feel very comfortable in my authentic self, I think that like, you know, in this specific relationship with like music, I think that Naisa is this person that I see is in music, you know. I can really feel Naisa's energy, and I can really feel that part of my energy in her. It will be cool just like documenting how I get to see her closer and how I am able to become her closer, you know, and or embody her more so. And, you know, I think it would be cool to see, you know, from now to later, yeah, where that journey is, like how much you guys will be able to see Naisa as well, because I feel both of us more or less have the same distance with her. So, you know, as beautiful as like all the different changes the City Hippie has had, something I've really realized what the City Hippie Radio is, it is really a show of documentation, of self-documentation. If it is of me, if it is of the guests that I have on the show, I just think the conversations that we have, the type of essence that it has, and the values that it upholds, it is always about the self-documentation and the journey of you know, who we are and who we're becoming and how we're thinking along the way of that. Thank you to our listeners, I guess. I guess you'll see me when you see me. I hope you have a lovely night, and I'll see you.